Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World, and tonight on the show we've got a cracking lineup of guests. We've got David Oldroyd-Bolt, he's an historian. We've got 2 historians on because we've got Peter Caddick-Adams as well. Returning for about the 10th time, we've got Simon Danczuk, he's a former Labour MP. Also got a brilliant broadcaster and author, Emma Wolfe, she's coming back on the show for the 2nd time, and broadcasting legend and GB News regular, Dawn Neeson. But first, let's go to the news.
Thanks, Lee. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Good evening to you. Our top stories. The Home Secretary has expressed her full backing for the Met Police during a meeting with Sir Mark Rowley. Suella Braverman told the police chief that she was confident any criminality will be dealt with robustly. The force says an exclusion zone will be in place, covering areas including Whitehall and Horse Guards Parade, effectively banning those on pro-Palestine marches. They've also admitted it's likely that officers will have to use force. Meanwhile, counter-protesters will be allowed into the area around the Cenotaph, which will have a 24-hour police presence. Ms Braverman's comments come as Rishi Sunak faces continued calls to sack the Home Secretary. She defied Downing Street by writing an article accusing the police of playing favourites with pro-Palestinian protesters. Number 10 said it didn't sign off on the article. Well, 2 teenagers have been charged with racially aggravated criminal damage after Free Palestine was sprayed onto the Cenotaph in Rochdale. One has also been charged with theft after poppy wreaths were taken from the base. Detective Chief Inspector Stuart Round said the damage has caused emotional distress in the local community. Israel's military says more than 100,000 Palestinians have moved from North to South Gaza in the last 2 days. Tens of thousands of people are thought to have made the journey today after the Israel Defense Forces opened an evacuation corridor. The deadline for that is now over. It's not clear when the next pause in fighting will begin. NatWest has scrapped about £7.6 million in potential payments to Dame Alison Rose over her role in the Nigel Farage debanking scandal. The former chief exec had been in line for an exit package of more than £10 million, but the board is now only giving her around 15% of that. Dame Alison says she's pleased the bank cleared her of misconduct, but the GB News presenter Nigel Farage says she failed in her duties.
She broke every rule in the Financial Conduct Authority rulebook. She breached my confidentiality. She told a complete lie about my financial situation, much to the amusement of my enemies. I was then forced to publish a subject access request, which contained a lot of very unpleasant and indeed deeply defamatory comments about me. And I had to do that to prove that the real reason I'd been debanked was because my views did not align with those of the bank.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Lee Anderson's Real World.
Tonight, I'm joined by the brilliant author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, and back as left in the corner, we've got Mr. Simon Danczuk, former Labour MP and a bit of a secret Tory, I think. But listen, guys, we're going to get... He's shaking his head. We're going to get straight to it. A former Prime Minister this week said that the Conservatives are drifting towards defeat. Emma, I don't believe that. I think we're going to win the next general election. I think we'll get a majority. But do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree with Boris Johnson completely. Obviously, it's unhelpful when former Prime Ministers weigh in. That's not what Sunak wants at all. Yeah. But I think he's absolutely spot on here. Rishi Sunak has failed to stamp his authority on the Conservative Party. We've seen that more than ever over the past few weeks. We had suspended MPs out campaigning. We now have had drift and drift and drift from Sunak on this issue of the marches this weekend. Yeah. He should have made a decision 3 weeks ago. It's no surprise that Remembrance Day weekend is coming up. The Armistice weekend is coming up. He's let it drift. He's got his Home Secretary going rogue. Yeah. I think that Sunak has lost control of his party. He's drifting, and a lot will depend, obviously, on what happens to Labour over the next 12 months, if it's about 12 months.
Simon, strong words from Emma. I disagree wholeheartedly with what Emma has to say.
I think I don't agree with Emma. I think there's all to play for on both sides. I think Sunak has steadied the ship, for, in terms of the economy. I think Starmer is getting his act together. But he's got problems around the Middle East and all that issue. His party's coming apart there. That might help Sunak. So I think there's all to play for on both sides.
That's interesting, Emma, because it talks about... I mean, let's have a chat about Starmer, because when I'm out on the doorstep, yes, people may be a little bit grumpy with the Conservative Party at the moment. You know, we've been through COVID, we've got the war in Ukraine, things, people feel like they might have less money in their pocket. But they're saying to me, we're not voting Labour.
Exactly. I think that Starmer has failed to make an impact. Absolutely, I would agree with you. Simon says that Rishi Sunak has steadied the ship. Well, I mean, pretty much had to steady the ship after Liz Truss sank it, capsized it, in last October. People are not feeling it in their pockets. That's the thing. Yes, the economy, yes, inflation is finally starting to sort of level off. Yes, the economy is starting to pick up. House prices are starting to pick up a little bit. But A, for how long? And B, people are not feeling richer. That's what's going to do it. It's the economy, stupid. We always say that. But I think over the next 12 months, we're heading into winter. People are desperately worried still.
So Simon, Emma's pushing the poverty button here. And I'm a big believer that in this country, nobody's in real poverty like we see in some of the countries that you've visited. Definitely in Africa. I know you go to Rwanda on a regular basis. Yes, people are feeling the pinch. I know they have fuel prices, petrol prices, whatever, but it's not the poverty we see in other countries.
No, absolutely correct. I mean, things have been tough for people, though. There's no doubt about that. But I think there's an acceptance that it's been tough. We've got through the pandemic. There's the war in Ukraine affecting energy prices. It's been a really, really tough couple of years. And in terms of Starmer and Sunak, the public don't love either of them. There's no love for Starmer, there's no love for Sunak. But it could be a 1992 situation where the Conservatives, if Starmer's not careful, just come through it and just about pip him at the post and win it.
And I think it'll come down to turnout, really. I think a lot of people, like myself, feel like homeless Conservatives. They don't know where to take that vote. That's what I'm hearing from so many people. Centre-right, rational people don't know where to go right now with their vote. And so it'll come down to, can Labour get the vote out? Yeah,
when it comes to election day, though, we all get pretty grumpy with our parties. Nothing's ever perfect. But when it comes to that day, and, it's 7 o'clock and the polling station's open, you turn up, don't you, and you vote.
I do, but I think there's a lot of disaffection with the whole thing, actually. I think people are sick and tired. And it's all very well comparing to other countries. Of course, we're far, far better off, more affluent than...
But Emma, this is Remembrance Weekend. And look what our grandparents went through.
My father.
Your father and Simon's parents and grandparents. That was real poverty. That was real struggle.
But you're comparing. It doesn't feel like that. If you're living, I don't know, in a cold home with 5 children, you can't, you know, and you're worrying about those fuel bills. Of course, people are worse off around the world. I still think people are shocked at what's happened over the past few years. Look, we wrecked the country in lockdown.
Simon?
Well, I agree with Emma on the point. It's all about turnout. And Labour's very good at getting the vote out, I have to say. And if Conservatives stay at home on election day, then the Conservatives are sunk. It'll all be about getting the vote out.
But we've seen, Simon, in the by-elections where our voters did stay at home.
Yeah.
And I think Reform actually stopped us winning in 2 of the most recent seats. Yeah. But turnout 35% in by-elections, and governments normally get punished in by-elections, but I guarantee you that those seats will go back blue at the general election.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that, yeah. But it's all down to turnout. It's getting the vote out. That'll be crucial.
It really is. And also these unforeseen events. You know, we weren't expecting the Middle East to explode, were we, in October? So I think over the next 12 months, there's going to be a few things that might just sink Starmer or Sunak.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of canvass returns back, Simon. We send surveys out on a regular basis, and we ask people's voter intentions, and it's basically, how did you vote in 2017? How did you vote in 2019? And which way do you intend to vote in the next general election? And I'm retaining over 80% of my first-time Tory voters. So that tells me I've got a really good chance of winning. Now, they're not... And people are generally more honest when they send a survey back than they're on the doorstep on the telephone. So in red wall areas, it seems okay-ish for me.
Yeah, and that's quite possible. I think we'll have a lot of mixed results across the country, actually. Some red wall seats will stay Conservative, and you'll lose some Conservatives where you perhaps didn't expect to lose them. So I think, and the Middle East will play a big part. Will some Labour voters, particularly in Muslim areas, Muslim voters, will they go to the Liberal Democrats, which would leave it open for the Conservatives?
And that's a good point, because, they might be grumpy with us, but they're just as grumpy with the Labour Party at the moment.
Exactly, and we know that Starmer is dependent on millions of Muslim votes, and who knows where they will go. But also, Lee, you make the point about, your support is looking pretty healthy, and I think it's different. If you do have a local MP that you really feel that, you're a high-profile guy, you're out there, you're talking about things, you're getting yourself into hot water once in a while for speaking out.
Me? Really?
and people admire that. No, people admire people who speak out.
Yeah.
If you have an MP who's pretty much faceless, if you have an MP who's not doing much, you don't really care passionately about them, why would you bother to go out and vote on a wet winter's evening next year?
Yeah. Simon, Reform, they say they're going to stand in every single seat in the country. And as we saw in the last 2 by-elections, they actually stopped us from winning seats. Now, I think one of their leaders, I think it was maybe Richard Tice, who was a regular on this show, on this channel, he said that he wanted to get rid of the Conservatives and basically help Labour to win the next general election. But I think what Richard forgets is that he sort of thinks that Labour will bring proportional representation in, which they won't, because that means some of their old guard will get the chop anyway. What they will do, my biggest fear, is that they will bring in votes for 16-year-olds, and then we'll struggle to get in, and Reform will not get a vote. So is he playing dangerous politics with our country?
Yeah. Dangerous game, and I admire Richard hugely, and I admire many in Reform. But it's a dangerous game when you start splitting the right up like this, because you're letting Labour in by the back door.
Simon.
Well, in a general election, I just don't think they're going to have the appeal that they've perhaps had in by-elections. Richard isn't Nigel, is he? Let's be honest about this. He doesn't have the profile that Nigel Farage has had in the past, and the impact he's had on elections. So I don't see him taking lots of votes away from the Conservatives. It's a general election. I think it'll be a minimal impact.
Perhaps we should have the general election when Nigel's in the jungle. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Emma. Now we're going straight to the yes or no quiz. Right, it's time for the yes or no quiz with Emma Wolfe and Simon Danchuk. Straight to it, because we've only got 3 minutes. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see. Right. Emma, first question to you. Should the Met Police ban demonstrations on Remembrance Sunday?
Yes.
Simon?
Yes, absolutely.
OK, number 2. Should we fly the Union flag on every public building in the UK?
Yes.
Yes.
Number 3. Do you agree with the Home Secretary that marches we are seeing are hate marches? Emma?
Yes.
Simon?
Yep.
OK. Number 4. Simon, do you agree that there should be no ceasefire until Hamas has released the hostages?
Yes, no ceasefire until Hamas agreed to a ceasefire.
See, that's a wrong answer, you see. It's yes or no, Simon.
Oh, sorry.
You've done this quiz now 4 or 5 times.
times.
It's a simple rule, Emma, yes or no. So, Emma, I'll go to you, a black mark. Do you agree that there should be no ceasefire until Hamas has released the hostages?
Ceasefire now.
So that's a wrong answer as well, because you said ceasefire now. It should be yes or no. OK, number 5, Simon, are you sad to see Carol Vorderman leave the BBC?
I'm pleased to see her leave the BBC.
Okay.
Yes, I'm pleased.
No, I'm not sad.
You see, you've not got the gist of this quiz.
No, I said no. I said no.
Okay.
I could answer correctly. He elaborated.
Look, I'm going to be generous this week and let you off with the nonsense that you was coming out with, which is just yes or no. I know politician, it's difficult.
Am I sad to see her leave? No.
OK. So, guys, there was a slight disagreement on question 4 about the ceasefire in Gaza. Simon, explain your position.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a ceasefire until Hamas are prepared to sign a ceasefire, and they don't have any intention of doing that, from what I've heard.
Sign a ceasefire? You think these guys are going to sit down and sign a ceasefire? I think we need a ceasefire now. At what cost are we going to go in and bomb Gaza to rubble? Innocent civilians' lives are being killed, and this is not the way to tackle Hamas.
Israel
It needs to be intelligence-led. These guys melt away, they disappear into the populations, they come abroad, they come to this country, and then they'll come back.
Israel have to be given the chance to finish the job. This is a terrorist organisation committed serious atrocities, and Israel have to be enabled and encouraged to finish the job.
When you say finish the job,
and get rid of Hamas.
When you say finish the job, you mean raise Palestine to the ground.
And you're saying that they're bombing it. They're actually approaching it in a very sophisticated way, and the sooner they can get to the end, the better. I agree with that, but they have to be given the space and time to be able to do it.
But Emma, how would you feel being an Israeli now, living in, say, Tel Aviv, and one of your relatives have been kidnapped, and there's 1,500 of your countrymen and women?
Absolutely. Look, I have nothing but compassion and absolute sympathy with everybody out there, actually, except for Hamas. And of course, the feeling of having a family member taken as hostage, the feeling of being at that music festival is absolutely beyond words. I'm not criticising Israel in the slightest, but I'm not sure this is the way to do it. I'm not sure it's going to be effective, and so many innocent lives are being lost.
Final words,
ceasefire now.
But the reason there's innocent lives being lost is because Hamas are using their own civilians as a defence, as a human shield, and that's absolutely appalling. But Israel has to be given.
There's got to be a better way to do this.
There's got to be a better way. We had a chance to free Palestine every time on my tour on a weekly basis now, and I've always said that the best way to free the Palestinian people is to get rid of Hamas, because they're controlling them.
And the sooner we get there, the better.
But look, fascinating. Thanks for the yes/no quiz. We'll call that a draw. But coming up next, we've got Dawn Neeson. It says here that she's a brilliant, trailblazing journalist and fantastic broadcaster, and I think she wrote this herself, so do not go away.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So joining me now in Back in the Days, Dawn Neeson. Thank you, Dawn, for coming.
Welcome.
Bit of a broadcasting legend. You worked for The Sun, you've worked for The Star. Some fun facts, you've climbed mountains.
Yep.
You went on honeymoon with George
Best. Yeah, absolutely. Didn't marry him, but just went on honeymoon with him.
And we'll talk about that later. You've been on a date with Boris Johnson's underpants, I believe.
Yeah, Boris was wearing them at the time. Well, almost.
Really? And the most impressive thing on your CV is being thrown out of China.
Yes.
What was all that about?
Oh, right, OK. Well, it was about 3 years after the Tiananmen Square massacre. Back in the 90s, and I was there working as a journalist, had the visa and everything, not a problem. The Chinese authorities knew I was there. We were working on something not at all connected with Tiananmen Square.
Yep.
And we were there for, like, I don't know, about a week and a half. And they suddenly decided that we shouldn't be there, Lee. I have no idea why, but they confiscated our passports. Fine. They confiscated our credit cards, also fine. They confiscated all the money we had, and they put us in a government-run hotel.
Really?
Now, the government-run hotels back in the day, they had locks on the outside, and they had a very, very scary woman that sat at the end of the corridor that would let you in and out of your room.
Sounds like a prison.
Yeah, funny enough, it was. And then the really scary thing was we'd been out working one day and we got back and there was a loft hatch in the ceiling just over the bed. And we got back and there were footprints on the bed.
Really?
And it's like, what the hell is going on up there? And so, and then they decided that they couldn't cope with this anymore. We weren't even there for any political reasons. So they escorted us to the airport and put us on the first plane to Hong Kong. And to this day, I don't know if I'm allowed back or not.
It says on my list that you went on George Best's honeymoon. Which one, by the way, and why did you go?
Right, OK, this is when he married Alex Percy, which I think was his second or third wife, back in 1994. And I was working for a newspaper at the time and we decided to help them have a delayed honeymoon. So we took them to Mauritius and obviously they wanted a journalist to go with them. I mean, you know, a bit of a tough ask. Yeah. So I volunteered to go with them.
Choice.
So it was me, a photographer, and George and Alex in the most beautiful resort in Mauritius. And you know what, Lee, one of my abiding memories, I mean, obviously George was very poorly, but one of my abiding memories was sitting on the beach with George, watching the sunrise in the morning over the ocean, him with a brandy, me with a cup of tea, and it was just like surreal. I'm sitting on a beach in Mauritius with George Best.
Was he poorly at the time then?
He was going through a very bad phase with his alcoholism, and Alex, who was lovely and still is lovely. I'm still in contact with Alex. Was much younger than him. And he had a great sense of humour, though. Yeah. We went out to dinner once, right? Bear in mind he was on honeymoon with his wife, who was gorgeous. And we went out to dinner once, and George ordered, right? He was doing the ordering, and he ordered oysters and bananas. And then spent the entire dinner absolutely wetting himself laughing at poor Alex and I, being much younger women, obviously, trying to eat oysters and bananas.
Well, just pick one of the two, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just gave up in the end.
So, booted out of China, been on honeymoon with George Best, and now what's this Boris Johnson's underpants?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, who hasn't had lunch with Boris Johnson's underpants?
Well, me.
I mean, Really?
Yeah.
It'll get round to you in the end. No, it was when I was working for Richard Desmond, who used to own the Express Newspapers Group, and Boris was Mayor of London and used to come round for lunch in the boardroom. So it was like Richard Desmond, a couple of other directors, and Boris Johnson and his assistant. Boris being Boris, I didn't realise I was behind him. Went to walk into the boardroom, sit down for this lunch, did that ruffling his hair thing he does, like, ooh, look, it's me. And then sat down, I don't think this was intentional, but I'm not sure, and then sat down at lunch next to me, I was the only female there, with his flies undone. So I'm sitting there trying to eat my meat and two potatoes, and it wasn't me because I'm vegetarian, by the way, but with Boris Johnson, who was then Mayor of London, with his flies undone. And it's like, what do you say? I'm the only girl there.
Yeah.
I didn't want to embarrass the poor man, so I just got through my chipolatas.
Okay, chipolatas, meat and two veg. What about these mountaineering? In their meals?
Oh, God, yeah, not in these hills, by the way. When you're a journalist and you're working on newspapers, you need something extreme to chill out to. So when I was much younger, back in the 90s again, I used to go mountaineering.
Really?
And there are 7 summits on each continent, the highest summits,
Yeah.
and it's a mountaineering theme to tick them all off, and I'm on 3 of them.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know.
What made you, Dawn? I mean, I speak to lots of journalists, broadcasters in this job. Why? Why did you walk into this field of life?
I have no idea why to this day. It's something, and this sounds really boring, it's something I really want. It's something I always wanted to do when I was a little girl. My dad drove lorries for a living.
Yep.
My mum was a cleaner and worked in factories, working class background. No one in this business at all. No one at all. And in fact, everyone's like, what? Really? Why would you do that? So I don't know why to this day. But Lee, as a little kid, I was drawing and making my own newspapers. My mum still got them.
Yep.
As a 7-year-old, I wrote to Marjorie Proops, who was on the Daily Mirror.
Marjorie,
on the Daily Mirror at the time, asking,
agony aunt.
yeah, absolutely, how I got a job in journalism. And she wrote back to me, and I've still got that letter to this day.
Wow.
But yeah, no family history, no background. I mean, 0 education, as you can tell. But it was just one of the things I wanted to do.
So, spending time on the beach with George Best in Mauritius, that's probably one of the highlights of your career. Any more?
I would say it's not really a highlight, but it's something I think, especially with everything that's going on now, I was lucky enough, if that's the right word, to experience what it was like covering the genocide in Rwanda.
Oh, dear.
And I also worked in Bosnia a bit when that conflict was going on. And one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, I'm stupid, right? I am genuinely stupid. I don't do fear. So we were covering the genocide in Rwanda, and we had to get across the border from neighbouring Uganda. And we had to go through the jungle because there was no other way to do it. So we crossed the border from Uganda to Rwanda, just me and a photographer. I mean, I was very young. And there was a group of armed militia, basically. But the thing is, the armed militia are about 12, 13 years old. And they had these blooming big guns, really big guns. And we gave them some dollars, and they let us in. And it was only after, when we were back, after we'd been working out there for a while, back in Uganda, in the capital, sitting in a bar, not too dissimilar to this, and the photographer said to me, do you realise we could have been shot at any time we were working there, and no one would have known because we weren't meant to be there? And it's only when you've done something like that and you take a step back and you think, blimey, yeah, that was a pretty dangerous thing to do. But yeah, the life, you don't ever forget things like that.
So no regrets in your
Not
career?
at all, I love it. And then I get to stand in a pub on a Friday night talking to you.
So let's talk about proper journalism. We've got Wokey of the Week.
Oh, yes.
So I've got 3 organisations or people who have been incredibly woke, done something ridiculous during the week.
A lot of competition.
So the first one, I think we're going to see a clip of this, actually, Dawn, is the John Lewis Christmas ad.
Ah, yeah.
La vita è una festa, la vita è una festa, la vita è una festa.
So, Dawn, you've seen the advert?
Yes.
Many times. It's gone viral. What do you think of that?
What drugs are you on to think, I'm going to make a Christmas advert? Let's involve a Venus flytrap. I I have no concept of how that works.
Well, I suppose that's quite obvious to some people, isn't
Yeah,
it?
obviously. And, you know, the other thing, I mean, I can never remember, with all the Christmas ads, right, I know what happens in them, I can never remember what they're trying to sell me, which I thought was the point. But with the John Lewis one, the music? That's weird. And why is there no dad involved? There seems to be 3 grown-up women and a little boy, and no dad.
Let's just put that one there, Dawn. So, Wokie 2.
Okay.
The SNP Justice Minister, Angela Constance, get this, claims that thugs who attacked riot police with fireworks and petrol bombs are vulnerable and disengaged.
I'm from a broken home, Gov.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, no.
They need disengaging, these people do.
What is wrong with criminal justice in this country where we try and make excuses for everyone doing something wrong while the rest of us are going, well, hold on a minute, you can get away with whatever you want then.
OK, so Wokie number 3 is Carol Vorderman. She's left the BBC radio show because she wants to carry on bad-mouthing pillars of the community like me.
Pillars.
Yeah.
She had another word for you, though, didn't she?
Yeah. But I think it began with P, actually.
P, yeah, I think it did.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, the BBC have done what they should have done. I mean, you know, the one thing I would say about Carol is she, whether you agree with her or not, she sticks to her guns, she says what she believes. I think she gets a bit personal, but that's not it. But it's like Gary Lineker's still got a job.
Yeah.
Is this something against middle-aged women speaking out?
Oh, could be.
Just saying, you know, very right on BBC, but, you know.
So, Wokie number 4, we've got 4 this week, Dawn, is, Australian Defence Force has banned the term unmanned when referring to drones in order to make language more politically correct.
Yeah, but get this, Lee, get this. They're calling them unscrewed instead. What?
You know
what?
You know when these drones are flying over wherever, these war-torn countries, and they destroy them, whatever, I think the last thing that's on people's mind
not
is
worrying about
whether they're unmanned or not.
No, they're not. They're not worrying about getting the pronouns right or getting the terminology right. I mean, just stop it.
So you've got 4. You've got John Lewis, we've got the SNP Justice Minister, Carol Vorderman, and the Australian Defence Force. Which one is it?
You know what? Because it is, we're in the run-up now to Christmas, obviously. I mean, only a few shopping days to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for the Christmas advert.
Right, I think that's...
Because what's wrong with Christmas? Why can't we have a Christmas tree? A family, presents.
Yeah, so...
Why can't we do that?
Yeah, John Lewis, if you're looking, then you are Wokie of the Week, as awarded by the legendary Joan Neeson.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Right, joining me now is broadcaster and historian David Oldroyd-Bolt. Welcome, David. And joining me once again, he's still here, can't get rid of him, it's Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP. Thank you, guys. Look, it's Remembrance Weekend, Armistice. You know, I get a little bit fed up sometimes with certain quarters in society who seem to apologise for our history, our culture, things we've done in the past. We look at the wars, you know, over the last 100 or so years, we've fought in 2 major wars, 2 major conflicts and other conflicts around the world. I don't think, personally, guys, that we celebrate enough the things we've done to keep this planet safe. David?
I don't think we do, really. And the point is that it's not just about remembering the First and the Second World Wars. It's about remembering the servicemen who've died in every conflict we've fought since the First World War. And there has barely been a year when British servicemen have not been engaged in conflict or in peacekeeping somewhere around the world. So this is much larger than merely that. And it should be a time for those whose family members have died to remember them, along with the rest of us thanking them for their service to the nation and to the cause of peace and democracy around the world.
Simon, you're a similar age to me, so people of our generation have got that link to the Second World War with grandparents or whatever, or parents. I certainly remember my granddad telling me stories of his, you know, his escapades during the Second World War, North Africa, Sicily, Italy, Monte Cassino, places like that. Do you think because our young people these days haven't got that direct link as such, that maybe they've not got the interest or, you know,
or just knowledge of it? Yeah, I think that's exactly right. My granddad fought in Burma. He fought at Dunkirk and had the medals to show for it. You know, and he would tell us the stories as we were growing up. But there is that disconnect now, and I think we can do more. We could do more, and I think we should do more as a country to build pride and to remind us of all the troubles and problems that we've gone through. But we've gone through and succeeded, and I think we could do much more as a nation to do that.
Because, David, when you look at the war memorials in our cemeteries up and down the country, we just see names. We don't see the stories behind the names, whose son or husband or daughter that was 100 or 80 years ago. And I think it's vitally important that, you know, as politicians, we remind people what happened. We need to do more in schools, I think, and colleges and training places, and maybe at university, because when kids get to university, sort of go in a different trajectory, don't they, and start apologising for our history.
Well, the problem is that we've lost the cultural memory of what these things meant. There was only one village in the entire United Kingdom during the First World War where nobody died. This was a conflict that touched absolutely everybody. This was not some kind of, as it would now be portrayed, some kind of conflict between elites for the sake of their own machinations and egos. This was a conflict of values that touched absolutely everybody in this kingdom. But I think we've lost the idea of what it means. As you say, your grandfathers fought. You heard the stories. I heard the stories from older relations myself. But as these servicemen have died, and as perhaps other conflicts like the Falklands haven't got the same memorial weight, yes, we remember them and we're glad that we won it, but it doesn't carry the same immense cultural significance that the First and Second World Wars do. We don't talk about them. We don't talk about why we fought them. We don't talk about why men were willing to go, and it was primarily men at the time. You had women on the home front, but there were not women fighting on the front lines. We don't talk about why men were so willing to go and fight. And yes, you had conscription, but why were there so few who really, as a proportion of those who fought, who were prosecuted for not going and fighting? Because they believed in it, and because they believed it was their duty to the society that had nurtured them and to the country of which they were proud to go and fight for it in its hour of peril. And I think these are the stories we need to resurrect.
It's true that, Simon. I mean, David makes a good point that the young men, and many of them were underage, especially in the First World War, 14, 15-year-olds going over to France to fight. they felt an immense sense of pride. They wanted to put the uniform on and go and fight for king and country.
Yeah.
Do you think we've sort of got that these days?
No, I think we're missing that. I think we need to rebuild patriotism within the country, and so at a broader level, I think we should do more to celebrate our national flag. I remember I've been over to Denmark on a number of occasions. Practically every private house there with a garden flies their national flag. Yeah. We rarely do that. We should have our public buildings flying our national flags. Yeah. I think we should teach better history in our schools so that younger people who are disconnected from the wars and troubles that we've been through before have a better understanding of our history. I think there's so much more we could do to build patriotism.
So patriotism, should we be prouder? Should we fly the flag?
Well, I don't understand why you wouldn't be proud of this country. If you compare the record of this nation against the record of nearly every other nation in the world, it is one of which anybody objectively could and should be proud. Yeah. And anybody who's denigrating that is doing so, I think, out of bad faith. Yeah. They're not doing so because they've looked at the historical record and found it wanting. They're doing so because they seek to undermine. Yeah. Because they actually don't want this country to celebrate its success, and because they want it to feel that we should be ashamed. Yeah. And I think on the point of history, one of the big problems with teaching of history is that it is no longer taught as a linear narrative, starting with the exit of the Romans, or even with the arrival of the Romans, and then what Churchill called our island story. Yeah. That's no longer taught. History is taught in small topics which are designed to highlight a particular aspect of sociology. Yeah. So people can't associate themselves with the long stretch of British history. They have no idea how we came to be who we are because they don't know the past 1,500 years of it. Okay. And they constantly see it as a battle of oppressed and oppressors. Actually, it is a Marxist narrative, and the whole history teaching curriculum needs to be resolved.
So, Simon, David mentioned Churchill there. I guess, with Remembrance Weekend, with the Remembrance Sunday, there'll be the apologists crawling from under their Marxist rocks and saying things like Churchill was a racist, he did this, he did that. Is it time? Was he of his time?
Oh, well, it was certainly of his time, and if it wasn't for Winston Churchill, we'd all be speaking German now. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I think it's a good time this weekend to remember Winston Churchill and to celebrate everything that he did for this country.
Yeah, I guess, though, Simon, that obviously Whitehall will be lit up with the old servicemen, the King will be there. It's right outside my office, actually, so it's a great spot to watch it. Look, do not go away. Still to come is Last Orders. We've got Dr. Peter Caddick Adams, who's going to join us and talk about remembering our glorious dead and all those people that lost their lives during the conflicts.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, that sounds like last orders at the barn today. I'm delighted to be joined by historian, military historian, and a reserve officer, Dr. Peter Caddick-Ammons. Peter, it's Armistice weekend. Sunday is a day when we'll all be out with our poppies on. I'll be at a service in Underwood in Nottinghamshire, remembering our glorious dead. It's something really important. I think every single year I go to one of these events. I try and go to different ones. Why is it so important that remember, you know, that the past, the wars, the glorious dead?
It's one time when the nation pulls together. Yeah. And you don't have to be a serviceman or servicewoman to feel part of that sort of community. It was triggered by the massive loss of life in the First World War. And before then, we never commemorated our dead in any way at all. And because there was such a universal suffering across the country, it was felt as soon as the guns fell silent in 1918, there should be some kind of commemoration. So we've almost fallen into Remembrance Day, Remembrance Sunday. It wasn't planned to be exactly like that, but it's a great way of commemorating all the Commonwealth and British service personnel who've given their lives ever since. It's not just a First World War thing.
But you've served your country, Peter. Yeah. You've got the uniform. What's the difference for somebody who's served in the forces to just a normal civilian like myself? That connection is much stronger, surely.
Well, I would say on the 11th of November, it's exactly the same, because most of us, if we but stop to think, had a forebear who was in the Second World War or the First World War. So that's what unites us, and it's a way of the services being part of the community rather than separate from them. Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right, of course. It's very, very special for us. And I've been on operations on the 11th of November in Bosnia in a field full of poppies. And my goodness me, you know, that really made an impact on me at the time.
So I've been to, over the years, been to a lot of services and the march, and, you know, we stand at the side of the War Memorial in the local cemetery. But it was always, you know, in probably the 80s and 90s, we're remembering people from 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. But in more recent times, you stood there and there'll be a lady my age or a little bit older whose son's died in Afghanistan, and she'll be stood there sobbing, and that sort of makes it real.
It makes it real, but it also acts, I think, as a sort of catharsis, because you need to be able to share your grief. Yeah. And the whole business about grief and post-traumatic stress disorder, we now know that if you can share that with other people, that helps, that leaches out that pain. And there's no better way to do that than on Remembrance Day itself. And of course, we now got the dichotomy of Remembrance Day, whenever that falls, which is the 11th of November each year, but Remembrance Sunday is the closest Sunday up to when that happens. And sometimes it's observed twice, which is great by my books.
Yeah, so the point I was trying to make is that when you look at the war memorials, you see the names of all these people from, you know, 70, 80 years ago and 100 years ago. For some of us, and I'm not being disrespectful, they're just names. But when you see the younger ones on, that's from Afghanistan and Iraq, they were alive when we were alive, and it really brings it home, and it makes you makes me realise what our, granddads and great-granddads went through all those years ago, because there was millions of people lost their lives, and big shortage of men in this country after the war. You can't imagine that these days. That we're really struggling to fill jobs, and it was a big problem for us. And you cannot begin to understand the scale of loss of life, and that's why I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, this is a wonderful sort of symbol that again sort of unites people, because it's not just the day, it's the season really for remembrance. Yeah. It does, the poppy harks back to the First World War, but it's representative of everything that's happened since. So, Afghanistan and Iraq have been absolutely ghastly, because it's not just the dead, it's the wounded, and some, horribly, horribly mutilated, who are still with us, and that's the wonders of modern medicine that's with us. And frankly, so many of those wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan would have died in the First and Second World Wars.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I used to go on the old Help for Heroes bicycle rides as the historian, and they would cycle around the battlefields of northern France, where you'd see the graves of the First and Second World War fallen. But those taking part were sometimes soldiers who'd fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and had lost limbs or were blind themselves. And that was the most rewarding thing, because to me it linked the then current wars with what had happened before, and you realise there's this thread, and it will never end. We will always end up sending people. What's going on in Gaza at the moment? We're protecting British citizens. That's why there are British people in the Eastern Mediterranean. We hope and pray that none of them will be killed.
We talked about the war graves in France, but we've also got some war graves in the UK. There's a big American cemetery in Cambridge. Now, I go to Cambridge 2 or 3 times a year. Sometimes I do pop into that cemetery and have a look and just read the names and think about where they've come from. You see the ages on there, and I think it's sometimes we forget that there was people from all over the world in the Second World War coming to this country. It could have been Americans, it could have been Canadians, it could have been people from New Zealand or Australia, or wherever they actually came, and a lot of their poor souls are buried in our cemeteries.
I mean, if you take a snapshot of Britain in 1944, there are about 3 million American service personnel here, and another million from Canada, Free France, Poland, and all the other nations who were helping us and were in exile at that time. And of course, some of them die from natural causes, they die in combat, but bring their planes back here. And that's how they end up sort of in their cemeteries. The Americans have a choice of whether to be repatriated or stay in the United Kingdom. But I think it's wonderful that so many have their next of kin have chosen to put them close to where they were serving, rather than in their homeland. And again, it's another reminder, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a sort of splendid place to visit Brookwood Cemetery. And there's one on Cannock Chase where all the Germans are buried as well. And they come into the picture too. But almost every town and village across the United Kingdom will have a little war memorial.
Yes, they do.
And one I used to live next to in the Cotswolds had a few from the First World War, far fewer from the Second World War, and one from the Falklands. And you realise that these things, this thing sort of never ends. And this business of remembrance is as close to us now as it was when those memorials were going up in 1919, 1920.
Peter, that's been a wonderful discussion. I could talk to you all day about stuff like that, especially the Second World War. I have a big interest in that because my granddad was there. I keep reminding myself that my granddad, he went through North Africa, he went through Sicily, he went through Italy. He was at Monte Cassino, and he's no longer with us, but he used to tell me a few stories. I don't think he really opened up because men didn't then, but thanks for joining me, that's absolutely wonderful. But look, do not go away. Coming up next, we've got Dawn Neeson, broadcasting legend, and she's going to be joining me to pull a pint. Now then, it's time for On the Pub with Dawn Neeson. Get your pint pot ready, Dawn, and you're going to pull us a pint in Record. Listen, she used to work behind a bar.
I did, but...
And it's a bit of a Bet Lynch lot going off here, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I deliberately wore this for you, but it was 18 years ago.
Did you ever meet Bet Lynch?
Eh?
You ever meet Bet Lynch?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a really good story, but I can't tell you on air. I'll tell you after, mate.
Okay then, mate.
Right, okay.
Go for it. You've got 30 seconds, Dawn, to pull a point. I'm looking. There's no pressure.
Ooh, a bit of head on this one.
Well, he's looking a bit frothy, Dawn.
That's very frothy.
Just slap it on the bar when you've done. A bit more, I think. You need to fill it up.
Yeah, that's going to be...
That's it, put it on the bar.
Hold on.
Yep.
Stop nagging, I'll get this at home.
OK. No, you can't do that, you're wasting beer.
That's only the frothy bits.
No, you're wasting beer.
It's the frothy bits.
We're in a cost of living crisis.
Look, you're not my
can't do
husband,
that.
shut up.
Stick it
Right,
on there.
that is the worst pint I've pulled for a long time.
Actually, it's not as
Actually, it's
bad.
not too bad.
It's not as bad as some of the pints.
No,
I
that's
think if
not
it had got a
too
little
bad.
less head on,
Yeah.
that'd have been fine. How did that feel?
You know, when I said it was 18 years ago, I actually meant it was 40 years ago that I last
Really?
did that. So actually, I'm quite pleased with that one.
You think you could return to the bar one day?
I'd love to. Best job I ever had.
So, listen, I reckon that's worth, because I have to mark out of 10.
Okay, do you? Right,
yeah,
okay.
so, I mean, I think we've got Fatima Whitbread and...
I bet she was good.
Yeah, she was really good.
Yeah, I bet she
really
was,
good.
yeah.
And we've
She's got the arm muscles.
We've got some 10 out of 10s on there as well, but I'm going to give that a 9.
Oh, thank you.
A 9.
I'll take that.
Yeah, 9 out of 10. That's brilliant. But, you know, chatting to you, Dawn, especially about George Best. And,
Oh, he was great. Such a lovely bloke.
And Boris as well.
Yes.
So you met some really interesting characters over the years.
And yourself now, Lee, obviously. Friday night with Lee, what's not to like?
So who's the most interesting character?
Oh, blimey. I would say, on a personal level, I would say, because I'm a football fan, I would say George Best.
Yeah.
He was just, there were so many sides to him, and Lee, he was just so charming. And I witnessed at first hand his battle with alcoholism. Yeah. And he was on hiding to nothing, because even when we were flying out to Mauritius on honeymoon, sitting at the bar, obviously it's George Best, everyone's come and talked to him, and they were all buying him drinks. And even though Alex, his new wife, was there saying, look, please don't buy him drinks, and...
So they were killing him?
Literally. Because they loved him so much.
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad.
It's not, I mean, I never have a bit of any beef with people who suffer from drug addictions or alcohol addictions, because it is a disease. I know it's a disease, and it's up there. I know it's up there.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say, or for you to say, that you shouldn't drink, and it's incredibly difficult for these people.
But finally, when we got back from Mauritius, I took him out to lunch to say thank you, and he brought Rodney Marsh along with him. Hi, Rodney, if you're watching. And I took him to lunch at a posh hotel at Sunday lunch, and I thought, right, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And they insisted on buying the most expensive bottle of brandy in the hotel, and it was a posh London hotel. And I had to go back to work, and it was a Sun newspaper at the time, and had my expenses in, and it was like 500 quid for a bottle of brandy.
Wow.
And they caned the whole lot between them. And obviously I was working, I didn't drink at all. No.
Well, that's an amazing story, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we'll chat a bit more after we've done this, Dawn, about the other stories you've got. So.
Oh, yeah, I can't say those, though.
Well, listen, that was Dawn Neeson. Pleasure
Thank
to
you
meet
very
you
much,
again, darling,
sweetheart.
and
Thank
thanks for coming
you.
on. That's Dawn. Well, look, thank you for joining Lee Anderson's Real World. It's been a cracking show, cracking guests. Got more cracking guests next Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News. But coming up next, we've got the Dinosaur Hour with John Cleese. Cheers. Stay safe. Have a great weekend.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Today's showers will ease in most places overnight with skies clearing. It's going to be a chilly night with a frost in places by dawn. We've got low pressure moving away. That brought some lively weather to southern parts in particular early on Friday. We've still got some weather fronts affecting northern Scotland to bring showery rain in during the evening. 1 or 2 showers also for Northern Ireland, northwest England, parts of Wales and the southwest. But most of these showers tend to ease overnight, just a few sprinkling into parts of the Midlands and East Anglia. And away from the showers, temperatures will fall 1 to 4 Celsius generally as we begin the weekend, but in some sheltered spots a touch below freezing. A chilly start, a frost in places, some fog patches as well, but actually plenty of fine and bright weather. And once any fog clears, once the frost also tends to lift, we're going to see a lot more fine weather into the afternoon. Blue skies for many, just 1 or 2 showers in the far north of Scotland, some high cloud drifting into the southwest, and temperatures of 9 to 11 Celsius, so a crisp, bright autumn day. A similar start on Sunday, a colder start, I think, for Scotland, eastern England, some dense fog in places as well. That will stick around until about lunchtime for parts of Yorkshire, for example. Elsewhere, we've got increasingly cloudy and rainy weather moving in from the southwest, and that's here to stay for the start of next week.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the